Too much of a good thing can certainly be a curse or a limiting factor in ingenuity. For me, this sentiment rings especially true when it comes to movies. The ability to digitally create and realize any idea in near lifelike convincing form, or with the aid of computers, has certainly revolutionized cinema. However, it also raises questions about whether this technological leap has come at the expense of creativity and craftsmanship. The debate between using computer-generated imagery, CGI, and traditional practical effects, stunts, and props continues to be a fascinating one. Due to this, some argue that cinema has died in the face of overly relying on CGI and it's lost its shine. Hollywood needs to be rejuvenated with something, and for me, it's about going back to the 80s and 90s and looking at some of those classics. So come with me now today as we look into it further and really get a good grip on what was going on back there, because it's when the most movies were released and it was a really interesting time. You see, for me, CGI became this next big thing in the 80s and 90s, and that's what actually fueled it. Many iconic moments in movie history were made. Sci-fi action films like The Terminator and RoboCop embraced cutting-edge effects, while movies such as The Never-Ending Story, Jurassic Park, Back to the Future, and Ghostbusters showcase an innovative blend of animatronics, green screen techniques, and practical effects. This era was defined by a willingness to experiment and push the boundaries of what was technically possible, and I think that's really where it came from, is that we're not pushing boundaries anymore. That's why things are kind of stale, because the level is so high with what's going on, and possibly with AI now it could go a good way or a bad way, but it's really about getting into it from the sense of a practical effect. It's all good at being able to type in a prompt, but what about making it happen for real? There's a lot more thought going into that, and we'll be looking into that in this episode of the show. So, one genre that particularly thrived during this period was the spy movie. And back then, spy films leaned heavily on these incredible stunts, ingenious, if not sometimes laughably implausible, gadgets and inventive plot lines. Unlike today's CGI-heavy offerings, these elements often relied on practical execution, creating epic moments that remain iconic to this day. It's arguable that ingenuity and spectacle of the films have yet to really be surpassed. Take the James Bond movies of the 90s, for instance. GoldenEye, The World Is Not Enough, or Tomorrow Never Dies. They're prime examples of how practical effects elevated the action and storytelling. The helicopter and tank chases, the elaborate shootouts, these high-octane pursuits were crafted in a way that felt tangible. Much of what you see on screen was achieved through real-world stunts rather than post-production and green screen methods. And they did use them, but it wasn't relying on it. They were creating the moment with practical effects, and that's what's core to this. You see, in Tomorrow Never Dies, one standout sequence involves Bond, handcuffed to a female Chinese spy, performing an escape whilst riding a BMW motorbike. And he's being chased by a helicopter through these bustling, narrow streets of Beijing. The complexity of the stunts, combined with the tight pacing and relentless action, makes for many an unforgettable scene. The direction demanded attention to detail. Each shot is a testament to the ingenuity and risk-taking of the filmmakers. Compare this to the modern Bond films, such as No Time to Die, which they're visually polished and undeniably slick, but these newer entries often lack the visceral impact of their predecessors. Chases feel more like car commercials, overly clean and digitally enhanced to the point of losing their edge. Even Bond's gadgets seem to have been stripped down, reducing their imaginative flair that once defined the character. Although they're still definitely there and they appear to look real, they're not actually real in the sense of a physical prop. It's all digitally added or aided or in some way altered in post. GoldenEye takes this craftsmanship to an even higher level. It's a relentless barrage of action, from tank battles to aerial dogfights, all shot with a focus on delivering realism without losing cinematic flair. The narrative is concise and efficient, allowing the action to take center stage. The film strikes a balance between grounded realism and the larger-than-life escapades that define the earlier entries in the James Bond series. Contrast this with modern attempts, where Bond often feels like a shadow of his former self, a bumbling figure weighed down by introspection, lack of libido, or where's his witty one-liners, which overall ends up feeling like Bond's just lacking the spark that made the earlier films so compelling. Looking back, the movies of the 80s and 90s represent a lost era of greatness. While today's technology allows for unparalleled precision and polish, it often feels like something vital has been sacrificed along the way. The charm of practical effects, the creativity of stunt work, and the ingenuity of gadget design have given way to an over-reliance on CGI and formulaic storytelling. These older films remind us of what's possible when innovation and artistry work hand in hand, crafting cinematic experiences that continue to captivate decades later. But let's pause for a second. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Starting here, we're jumping ahead of ourselves. We're forward in the timeline of the technologies involved in cinematography and practical effects. Let's just recap for a moment and go back to the evolution of these changes and the advent of CGI. Now, if you're enjoying the video so far, please give it a like. It really helps our channel grow so we continue to bring you content like this. Practical effects definitely have evolved through the decades, and for me, and I think many will agree with this, they seem to somewhat crescendo at a peak in the 80s and 90s, when there was a hybrid crossover between clever camera trickery, computer assistance, and physical stunt or prop work, where they met at a crossroads, complementing one another, in unison with incredible script writing and far out sci-fi plots. Even sequels were good back then, so good they were better than the originals in some cases, such as Terminator 2. The era was a time of excess and the unlimited pursuit of perfection, breaking through plateaus and trailblazing new, often highly risky and extremely expensive movie concepts. It can be argued that this was all brought to a stop by one phenomenon: torrents, or more specifically, the Pirate Bay. Back in the pre-Pirate Bay era, movies made money, like a shit ton of money, and there was no Netflix. And people went to the cinema and they viewed the latest releases, and then they waited for the VHS or DVD release. It was a golden era when creativity was truly rewarded. The craft of practical effects, using miniatures, animatronics, matte paintings, stunts, they were notably pioneered by the Industrial Lights and Magic team of Lucasfilms and Stan Winston, the makeup artist for Terminator, Jurassic Park, Aliens, Predator, to name a few. Take for instance, starting in the late 70s, the classic late Star Wars trilogy. George Lucas founded Industrial Light and Magic, otherwise known as simply ILM, specifically to handle the film's visual effects, which was considered extraordinary groundbreaking at the time. Techniques like motion control photography for consistent spaceship movements and matte paintings for backgrounds were extensively used throughout production and culminated with the iconic Death Star. Creating the Death Star trench run was a significant challenge involving miniatures, models, and complex camera work, the likes of which are not used in production today and stay as golden moments in movie history. The way the crafts combined audio design, script, casting, and the special effects made the whole experience feel real. Maybe it was more convincing than CGI because it was partially real, on a smaller scale, but still real, and the eye can tell. You know, I never liked the reworkings of it where they add the CGI in. It stands out like a sore thumb. The original movies were best, and it's really obvious to see. So it's great to look back at them, you know. The production of Star Wars was wrought with challenges, from sandstorms, destroying sets in Tunisia, to the studio 20th Century Fox losing faith in the project, leading to cutting the budget, making Lucas fight to realize his vision. This fight, the sheer determination of Lucas and the crew, is a story arc we don't see as much in modern production. To paraphrase, too much of a good thing can certainly be a limiting factor. In modern production, remember to compare not just the craft of filmmaking in the physical sense of props and stunts, but also the technical methods, the editing suite, the equipment being used. Everything had the difficulty level turned right up, and yet they persevered to make a movie that is still remarkable to this day and will continue to be a golden standard in cinema production. During this time, Alien also premiered, which featured a different kind of ambience we'd seen in the more family-friendly Star Wars. It's incredible to think that this iconic sci-fi thriller was made in 1978 using analog techniques and was really built from the ground up. The practical effects used for the facehuggers and chest-bursting scenes are still memorable and remain a pinnacle of movie production. Modern movies don't seem to want to try these techniques anymore, as it's just easier and therefore preferable to make it on a computer. But the grittiness, the reality of the alien is now lost behind a veneer of overly perfected pixels. Moving forward into the 80s, the next big movie to rely heavily on CGI was Tron, which by today's standards looks, let's be honest, kinda ridiculous. It's fair to say Tron hasn't aged well compared to the original Terminator and Alien, which premiered prior to Tron. It's easy to see the stark differences between the two, and this is possibly most clear with the AT-AT walkers of The Empire Strikes Back. All made with stop motion 2 years prior to Tron, and yet watching it now still feels more convincing. The elements of the movie come together in a way that Tron tries but fails at miserably, as it's all drawn well on a computer, but it's not really there in the sense of a model that the eye can detect the subtle differences, no matter how much the artists try to pull off a convincing look. The CGI is clearly prominent as almost the main character of the flick. It was James Cameron's Terminator 2 and Spielberg who took it to a whole other level with Jurassic Park in the early 90s. And I can remember going to the cinema and seeing Jurassic Park with my parents, and it was packed. You know, the cinema was absolutely packed. They blended practical effects, action sequences, CGI, gripping storytelling, and animatronics to craft a mind-blending visual feast for audiences worldwide, reinforcing that when all of the facets of the arts are used in unison, the end product can really output a remarkably sensational result. CGI in its early days worked better as a supporting tool instead of a primary focus, and Jurassic Park, Terminator 2, and the unforgettable Die Hard cement this fact home. We barely notice any CGI in Die Hard. For the others, it's obvious it's there, but it's at the crossover of, was it a prop, was it added in post, or a mix of both that gets the viewer's attention to focus on the story, rather than how amazing the CGI is. In the spectacle of modern blockbusters, CGI reigns supreme, crafting worlds beyond our wildest dreams. Films like those from the Marvel Cinematic Universe or Avatar immerse us in fantastical realms, where digital artists conjure creatures, landscapes that define the laws of physics and budget constraints. This digital artistry allows for great flexibility in storytelling, enabling filmmakers to alter scenes long after the cameras stop rolling, from changing backgrounds to de-aging actors with a few clicks of the mouse, and that's possibly core to what the audience picks up on and what the big difference is here. It's just simply not real anymore. Was it ever real? But it felt real, you know? Although the scenes beg of this hyper-realism, there's certainly a cost to this digital dependency, a potential for audiences to feel detached, sensing the artificiality of what they see on screen, which often, if not always, blunts the emotional edge of the narrative and removes the immersion of real life to that of something purely a fantasy that cannot be believable at all. It's just a movie after all, right? The mind doesn't get taken away. It's so well manufactured, over-engineered, and over-polished. Contrast this with the tactile, gritty reality of cinema from the 80s and 90s, epitomized by films like Fight Club, which was made just before the turn of the millennium in 1999. In Fight Club, the art of filmmaking was grounded in the real, the tangible. Even though the film's all about someone losing their mind, it still feels real in the sense of when you watch it, the CGI is there, but it's part of the story, you know, where the actors are there too. The fights, the chaos, the destruction. They're all captured with a raw authenticity that only practical effects can provide. The explosions, the blood, the sweat, every element feels real, giving the audience a direct line to the characters' experiences. This approach wasn't just about necessity due to technological limitations, it was a creative catalyst, pushing directors and effects teams to innovate within the constraints, resulting in scenes that resonate with a palpable sense of reality. The dirt, the set design, the haunting natures of the characters. In the spy genre, classics like the early James Bond films, or going further back to Michael Caine's The Ipcress File, were defined by their ingenious gadgets. Think of the shoe with the knife or the iconic Aston Martin with its array of secret weapons alongside intricate, often geopolitically charged storylines. These films had a measured pace, allowing for deep character exploration and suspense to build, with the spy's wit and charm as pivotal as any gadget. Modern spy films like the Mission Impossible series escalate the spectacle with breathtaking action sequences and technology it seems ripped from tomorrow's headlines, yet still strive to keep characters at the core, especially in the first of Tom Cruise's outings in the 1996 Mission Impossible. The pacing is faster, the stakes higher, and there's an ongoing effort to ensure the human element isn't lost amidst the chaos. Nostalgia plays a significant role in how we see films today. There's a romanticized memory of the suave, sophisticated spy who was navigating Cold War tensions with a martini in hand, far more basic technology, a non-smartphone enabled era when contrasting with today's high-octane, CGI-enhanced escapades. This nostalgia not only shapes our perception but also influences contemporary spy films, which often attempt to pay homage to their predecessors while trying to innovate inside of this new CGI-dependent world. This ultimately seems to result in less risk-taking and much more simple scenes. Shootouts, car chases, and the gadgets seem to be more toned down, predictable, and have lost their ostentatious ridiculousness that just seems to flow in the original movies. Maybe because we have such advanced disposable technology now, the concept of thinking to the future is just being lost, because we're already living in the future, right? As an ability for an imagination is depleted and replaced with this instant gratification, I think it's about to get a hell of a lot worse with the AI prompt, because it's just that instant gratification. There's no work to get what you're trying to shoot. The blockbuster era has shifted the focus towards larger-than-life experiences, where every film seems to compete in a race for the most memorable CGI or action-packed sequence. Yet there's a countercurrent, a yearning for the kind of cinematic experience that was once the norm. Films that prioritize narrative over spectacle, where the magic is in the storytelling and not just the special effects. One may postulate that the heart and soul of movies have been ripped out by the advent of torrenting. The ability to simply access movies without paying has meant the most creative in the industry are not compensated, and therefore they don't bother anymore. It might sound ridiculous, but I think maybe it is really at the heart of it, is that they don't want to do it anymore because they feel like their art's going to get ripped up. The 80s and 90s are often viewed through these rose-tinted glasses, a period when movies like The Breakfast Club, Die Hard, or Jurassic Park were not just films, but also this cultural phenomena. Let's not forget that nostalgia for this era plays a significant role in how we perceive these movies now. There's a collective memory of simpler times, of movies that felt more personal, more about the human condition than about the next big explosion. This nostalgia isn't just about the films themselves, but the experience of watching them in a less digitalized, more communal world. A world without social media, a world without the connectivity we experience today. Has these technological advancements designed to bring us closer together? In fact, done the complete inverse. This longing has fostered a resurgence of retro aesthetics in modern media. Shows like Stranger Things have attempted to tap into this nostalgia by recreating the vibe of 80s sci-fi and horror, complete with synth-heavy soundtracks and a nod to Spielberg's storytelling. Films like Top Gun: Maverick have capitalized on this by bringing back beloved characters and settings, blending modern filmmaking techniques with the essence of what made the original so iconic. This trend isn't just about looking back, it's about reimagining the past through a contemporary lens, offering audiences a blend of familiarity and novelty. It's a recognition that while we march towards an ever more advanced visual storytelling, there's still a place and indeed a high demand for the aesthetic and narrative simplicity of bygone decades, proving that in cinema sometimes the old ways can actually feel new again. In conclusion, this sensitive blend between progress and tradition in filmmaking is an ongoing narrative, and one that mirrors the very stories we see on screen. Technology has undeniably expanded the artist's palette, allowing for visions of worlds, characters and narratives previously unimaginable. Yet, it's the creativity, the human touch that breathes life into these digital canvases. The magic of cinema has always been in its ability to connect, to tell stories that resonate on a human level, whether through the pioneering effects of Star Wars, Aliens and Terminator combined with the intimate storytelling of a human touch of a character-driven drama that underpins the whole thing. The future of cinema lies in striking this harmonious balance between these crafts and breathing creative light into ideas to make them stand out from the page. Digital advancements offer new tools for storytelling, but the craft of filmmaking, the art of directing, the depth of character development, the tactile nature of practical effects, these are the traditions that give films their soul. So, thanks for watching. Please hit subscribe and like, turn on bell notifications if you want to get more of this, and thanks for supporting my channel. Have a great day.